James here from GoodGuitarist.com, and in today's lesson, I'm going to show you some simpler versions of the most common basic chord shapes designed to reduce finger strain. One of the members of my website, Miriam, is having some issues with arthritis, so we came up with some strategies to help her keep playing while avoiding pain and injury, and I figure there's bound to be other people who would benefit from this information, so I've put together this lesson with some chord shapes and some easy 2, 3, 4 chord songs that you can practice these shapes with. I also have some general tips for making your guitar easier to play using a couple of tricks. Now, before we dive in and learn these chord shapes, it's important that our hands are warmed up. A while back, I hired a physiotherapist to help me design a guitar health kit, which is included in premium membership on my website. Links are down below for all that stuff if you're curious, not only about that, but all the other awesome benefits that premium membership offers you. Anyways, the physiotherapist made it really clear that warming up is probably the most important thing to do. And the exercise is really simple. You just close your fist and open it. You're not squeezing, you're not straining, you're just gently closing and opening your hand. You can do that 10, 20 times, until you start feeling it warmed up a little bit. Another tip that she had was to physically warm up your hands by maybe doing the dishes or even just running them under some warm water. And once we've taken care of that, we can dive in and learn our first chord shape. Normally, G is played with 4 fingers, like that. But we can simplify it into G6 by just putting our middle finger on the 3rd fret of the thickest string and letting it droop down a bit and mute the A string. And this gives us a G6 chord. It doesn't sound exactly like G, but it's very useful. If you want, you can add your ring finger to the 3rd fret of the thinnest string. And at this point, that is straight up a G chord that you can use anywhere. And feel free to change fingers depending on what works for you. You'll find that as you add other chords before or after this one, that certain fingerings work better than others. Now, from this simple G chord, we can switch to E minor. And normally we would play our E minor like this, with our index on the 2nd fret of A and our middle finger on the 2nd fret of the D string. But that requires a lot of finger curling. And one of my goals with all these chord shapes is to reduce the amount of finger curling and the amount of pressure required. And we're going to accomplish that by reducing the number of fingers in each chord shape while still retaining the character of that shape. So for this E minor chord, we can remove our middle finger. Just use our index finger, press it on the 2nd fret of the A string, and you can let it droop and mute the D string, but make sure it's high enough that the G string rings open. And with just those 2 shapes, you could put your middle finger on the 3rd fret of the thickest string for G, and then your index on the 2nd fret of the A string for E minor. You could play Songbird by Oasis. Just add a little bit of strumming to each of those. Now, the next simplified chord is, instead of a D chord, just playing a D5 chord. So it's a lot like our regular D chord, except we're not putting our middle finger on the 2nd fret of the thinnest string. So my index is on the 2nd fret of the G string, my ring finger is on the 3rd fret of B, and since I'm not putting my middle finger there, I can let my fingers relax a bit more. They don't have to be so bent and so curled. There's not so much pressure. I can take it a little bit easier. And a cool thing here is I can leave my ring finger down, and then I can try to get my middle finger to that 3rd fret of the thickest string, and I can play a G chord. So this is a really low pressure way to play G back to D. And with that, you can play What I Got by Sublime, Lively Up Yourself by Bob Marley, and you'll find G and D in a lot of other songs, as you'll see once we start adding a couple more shapes. The next simplified chord is, instead of a C major chord, playing a C add 9 chord like this. And with G, C, and D, we're really starting to unlock the amount of tunes we can play, like Amazing Grace, Blowing in the Wind. I'll link a lesson down below for all of this, but for that one in particular, we start with an easy version, and then the second half of the lesson adds all this cool stuff. So you can do the first half, no problem. Leaving on a Jet Plane, Ring of Fire by Johnny Cash, The Joker by Steve Miller, the classic traditional song, Will the Circle Be Unbroken. You know, there's a lot of great tunes using G, C, and D. And we'll just start on our D chord, leave our ring finger down. We put our middle finger on the 3rd fret of the A string, that's our C chord, and on the 3rd fret of the G string, that's our G chord. So we're leaving our ring finger down, you can see there, and we just have to move one other finger at a time, and we can play all those songs that use G, C, and D, plus a ton more. And the final simplified chord that I'd like to show you is, instead of playing the A major chord, we can just use our index finger on the 2nd fret of the D string and let it droop a little bit, so it's muting the G string. That gives us A sus2, which is a useful chord in its own right, but also works as a great substitution for the regular A major chord. And with that, we can work our way through some songs using D, G, and A, like Bad Moon Rising, Free Fallin', Get Back, I'll Fly Away. I mean, there's a whole bunch. Tambourine Man. I'll put links to all these down below so you'll get a chance to work on these chord shapes. As far as switching though, I'm going to start on my D chord again. It's kind of like our home base. When we're going into the A chord, we just have to lift our index finger one string and then let our ring finger off. You know, and we can work our way into that simple G chord. And you just practice going back and forth between the chords and getting used to it. It's best to do it in the context of the song. So, you know, if Get Back requires you to go from D to A, you practice that switch. Now, before you go, I want to share a couple of additional ways to make your guitar easier to play. The first one is using a capo. A capo is generally used to raise the pitch of the entire guitar. You know, you just put the capo on somewhere and then you pretend that that's the end of the guitar and you can play in a higher key. But one of the side effects of that is that it's pressing the strings down and it makes them a little bit easier to press. Like when I play my G chord here, even the full one, it's a lot easier. The frets are closer together, you know, so that can kind of shave off a little bit of the difficulty when it comes to pressing the strings. Another thing you can do is tune down every string by a whole step. That means one letter each. So instead of E, you tune it down to D. Instead of A, you tune it down to G. This is called whole step down tuning. It's a standard thing that people do on guitar, and it makes the strings looser and easier to press. Now, there is a problem with both of those methods, and that is that they're going to change the key of your guitar. And that means if you try to play along with a song, you're going to be in a different key. Your G chord is going to sound different than theirs. But you can combine those two methods, tuning the guitar down a whole step and then putting a capo on the 2nd fret, and they will cancel each other out. The capo raises the key and tuning down lowers it, so you end up right back where you started. I have a whole video showing you exactly how to do this if you're curious about making your guitar easier to play while staying in standard tuning and being able to follow along with, you know, lessons like this or songs that you want to play. And I'll put a link for that down below. Now, if you enjoy learning guitar with me, I'd really appreciate it if you could take a moment to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. And if you want to take your playing to the next level, you might be interested in my premium membership on my website. I'll put a link down below, or you can just visit goodguitarist.com and click on courses. Let me know if you have any of your own tips or simplified chords that I might have missed. Have a fun time practicing, and I'll see you soon.